So what we've seen is that our hero is the child of promise. He's the child of prophecy. He's the promised one. All your hero stories where you hear, whether it's Star Wars or whatever, where you hear the stories of a promised saviour to come and one who will come and fulfill certain things. John is doing all of that. The Bible has the pinnacle of that because it's actually real, it's true, it's points in history where we can actually draw strength that our faith is true, that we can know that what God says is true. When we look at the passage that we've been looking at today, what we see is that John fulfills 3 of the Old Testament clear prophecies about being the one who comes in the spirit and the power of Elijah, who will prepare the way for the Lord, who will turn the hearts of the fathers back to the children. John is coming to fulfill all of that and does all of that. But in verse 17 we also have a curious 4th statement about his life and his ministry, and that is that he will cause those who are rebellious to accept the wisdom of the godly. When you start to unpack that, what you start to realise is it links to the purpose and the nature of his work. That the other prophecies that we see and that we've been studying, they link into this role where John is bringing this prophetic challenge, and we see that as we look through and work through understanding the nature of John's work. Wisdom is often something that we don't talk a lot about. It's amazing when you look back in the Old Testament and you see that Solomon that comes to power and prays to God for wisdom. When he's asked what would he like to succeed his father, he asks for wisdom and becomes the wisest person who ever lived. Perhaps it was Solomon who wrote Proverbs 4. But Proverbs 4 is a great example of a father's wise advice, where the father is saying to people, let me tell you about wisdom. Let me tell you what wisdom is. Let me tell you what wisdom looks like. Let me give you the characteristics of wisdom. Here, Proverbs 4 is described as this father's wise advice. And we know that part of John's role is to turn the hearts of the fathers back to the children. And Proverbs 4 is this lesson in wisdom from a father to his children. So, for example, in verse 13, he says, guard it well, for it is your life. Some people would quote that some of the translations would say it's the wellspring of life. Verse 23, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Clearly, wisdom is something that gives us fullness of life. And when we know the wisdom of God, and we are actually starting to live in the wisdom of God, maybe, just maybe, that's how we can start to actually know life and life to the full. Because to do life God's way is to do the way it was always intended. If you want to put together an IKEA table, you follow the maker's instructions. If you don't, you end up with bits missing or bits in the wrong place. How much more so with God? If God created us and knows us and knitted us together in our mother's womb and is the creator and the sustainer and the author of life, then actually to follow his wisdom, if we want to know fullness of life, what better way to go is there? So if we understand that the wisdom of the godly is God's heart and God as our loving Father helping us know how to live life and life to the full, then that sense of the rebellious sort of points a bit to, for example, the story that Jesus told of the prodigal son, and that sense of the father's heart. People often talk that the prodigal son is actually more of a story of the father's love. But there is the father with his arms outstretched, waiting for his rebellious son to return. And here we have John with a mission of turning the hearts of the fathers back to the children, but also to turn those who are rebellious to accept the wisdom of the wise, of the wisdom of the godly. And so we have a picture here of the wisdom of the godly, God standing there with his arms outstretched, inviting people back to do things right.